Welcome back to the Covenant Cast. It is the official RPG Takeover episode, so we have booted out Zach, and I am your host, Steven.
I am Jonathan.
And I'm Robert.
And today we are going to be discussing our rediscovery of Dungeons & Dragons. All right, well, let's dive into things here, guys. So everyone listening and watching out there in the digital world, basically we're doing this cast on Dungeons & Dragons and our rediscovery of it with 5th edition, and it's a very recent phenomenon that has happened. Wanted to share that, and Zach, not the biggest role player D&D guy.
Too sweet. I don't think he's ever played.
However,
that's not true.
The three of us, Jonathan and I, obviously we grew up playing together as family.
Mm-hmm. Father and son.
Robert was a role-playing guy as well. So we just had a lot more to contribute as a three-man role-playing team instead of having Zach try to feel all
the real reason Zach's at Disney on Ice.
And and the other important thing is that we actually have a D&D campaign in the works right now. So what better way to talk about that than to get all three of us on the cast here. Of course, we're going to start off with some answers from previous episodes. I've got Jim Souder here, a long comment, Jim, and it's a great comment, a truly great one. I'm not going to read it all, but if you guys are curious for more on Jim's answer, you can find that on our YouTube channel. You can literally search for his name, and it'll be there. But a little quick taste, yes, I believe that you can. At least I can. I don't know if you can do that on the front end of the site. As someone who worked for Games Workshop in the design studio /White Dwarf /web during the tumultuous years you referenced, that's 2007 through 2016, I saw the title of this cast and thought, uh-oh, here we go.
As well he should.
However, I like where this is going. It was quite interesting to see how you interpreted those times. I was fortunate to have the pleasure of working alongside some of those early founders, specifically Jervis Johnson and Rick Priestley, and hearing the stories of the early days firsthand. I wouldn't say we were, at least some of us, against using technology at the time, as my legacies were founding the first YouTube channel we had, and comments were and still are enabled.
Well,
so a little bit of interaction, a little bit of community interaction.
It's very interesting if you go back.
Not a total dark curtain.
Of all the places to engage with the community.
Yeah, right? My other legacy at the time was bringing 360 model views to all products on the website, which even today very few others do.
That's cool.
Apparently that's which became a popular feature for many visiting the site. Some of us were fighting the good fight from within. Finally, I have nothing but fond memories of working for the company during that time. However, I was totally sympathetic to what the fans and retailers were going through during those blackout years. And I'm really happy to see what my fellow colleagues and friends are doing today, and hoping long it may live. So thank you so much, Jim. That's really amazing.
Really cool.
Have a listener and viewer. Jim's made some comments on Facebook as well, and just an integral part, seemingly, of Games Workshop.
Someone on the inside, and it's really nice to know, like, just to get that perspective, because things inside a company and outside a company are usually very, very different.
Oh, that's never true.
They're carbon copies of each other.
That's right.
Perfect in every way.
Public perception is spot on, 100%.
That's right.
So that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that, Jim. We appreciate it. Robert, why don't you kick it off here with
Philipanda. Mr. Panda writes, it was weird to see you guys skip over the fact that the L5R novella brings alt art cards, whereas the Arkham ones are exclusive. I understand the difference between the games, but I really think a lot of the negative/non-negative reactions stem from that.
I did miss that.
I
totally missed it.
Did miss it, but I would also say that the proportionate difference between the communities is existent as well, in that the Arkham folk, they have other major world-renowned authors that are now long since dead who have written the greater body and set all the precedents for what is Arkham. But L5R, it's this thriving, ready to appreciate it, if not consume, whatever is being put out. So as far as I could tell on the interwebs, more or less everybody who is an L5R aficionado, it's like, yes, more.
They want more lore.
More.
That's a really interesting point, because if you're going to put out a novella for Arkham Horror, you're immediately going to be competing with Lovecraft himself.
But then, and so many people for Arkham is just like, okay, cards and books in the trash.
Yeah, but L5R, they don't have that sort of hierarchy, not hierarchy, but the sort of nobility.
Yeah,
of
that
authors.
precedent.
Yeah, not to say there aren't great L5R.
And at the same time, like, that is a big difference in the alt-art cards, because like when the Arkham came out, it's like I could understand if they were just different versions, but having them exclusively only in the novellas to ever get this ability for this character.
It's a little bananas.
That does make you get the book, and perhaps that's why so many of them are getting dumpstered, because it's just an avenue by which
I resent this.
He's
come in.
recycled the books instead of putting them.
What about you, Jonathan?
Hey, Open Boats, thanks for having an easy to pronounce name. He says, I'm that guy who switched from Warhammer Fantasy to X-Wing, and there are a lot of that guys out there. I added that last part. Other than the cost, it was 100% the painting and assembly requirement. I loved almost all of it, the world GW created, reading the codexes and history, building armies in my mind, and parsing the list out. But I just got crushed by the hours and hours of clipping, gluing, priming, and painting required.
Beans.
It's a bit my personality, and Open Boats is a bit my personality too. I'm craving the imaginative exercise more than the reality, but it sounds like I'm not alone, and you aren't.
That's the truth.
Yeah, I love doing that kind of stuff, and I have gotten into numerous...
You're a clipper? You like clipping and gluing?
No, the other part. The reading the codexes, the thinking of the list, the imagination of the world. And
Kodai.
The Kodai, yeah. And to be fair, Warhammer Fantasy has a great world. X-Wing has a known world, and Open Boats continues. For me, X-Wing is still great because it consistently engages the imagination on a variety of levels. The Star Wars universe grabs you right away. The list building slide allows relatively deep levels of mathematical analysis and imagination, and the gameplay itself requires a fair bit of spatial imagination and planning. But it does this all while being easy to access.
That's why it's number one.
And I think that
Number
is very,
one.
very true. There's a
least it
lot
was
to be
number one.
said for and we have said quite a bit about the hobby of painting being its own exercise in its own right. And a lot of people who come to miniatures gaming through other games, through gaming in general, aren't there for that. They aren't there for the painting and the modeling, the setting up cool things. I mean, we didn't really know about until we went to Adepticon a couple of years ago and just seeing all of the cool models that were set
We didn't know
out there.
anything about that.
No, that's a big part of
It
it.
was a foreign
Didn't know anything?
idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like people really seem to care about the models, and they look
There's some sweet
beautiful.
models
You
out
know,
there.
you go
Yeah.
through Gen Con, and it's like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And model design has only gotten better.
It's
over
gotten
the years.
amazing.
But once
It's
you do it,
insane.
Yeah,
once you
it's-
do it, you're like, oh, there's no way I can get good at this.
It's super rewarding. But I mean, to us, whenever we looked at model painting and putting the models together, it was more on the line of sleeving your cards. At least that was in the same compartment in my mind. And for sleeving your cards, it takes a lot longer to put those models together. So X-Wing
No
solves
way.
it. A lot of stuff that even the plastic or the resin models that are happening, the push to complete models, all that stuff is great because it gets people on the board. And then if they have a little extra time, you can put a little splash of color
I mean,
on there.
I guess that's the other thing
that
too.
matte
Is
gloss finish.
like you can have so modeling doesn't necessarily have to mean clipping, gluing, priming, painting.
We have the technology.
It could just be priming and painting. Like there's probably a lot of people that would just do the painting if they didn't have to deal with the putting together and assembly and all that kind of thing. So the more you can kind of make it modular, where if you just want to jump in and paint, you can do that. If you want to jump in and not paint, you can do that. If you want to go from scratch, you can do that. Of course, it's very difficult for a company to create all those different avenues in the same game.
Outsource it to a local artist near you.
But who knows? Yeah, I continually try.
They might hold your models.
Okay, so let's talk about this week then. Let's get a little personal catch up with everybody. Who wants to start? Jonathan, why don't you start?
I'll start.
You're on
So
the
in
left.
this last week since the last podcast, I've actually played Godtear now twice. Which
That
is
is
the
true.
game that's an early alpha from Steamforged Games. It's based on sort of the MOBA dynamic of the little creep dudes and then your big champion. And I gotta say,
Is that
even
a technical
in this,
term? Little creep dudes?
Little creep dudes, yeah.
creepers?
LCDs is what they call them in the manual. But they just put out the second version of it, so they've already updated it, like 1 weekend release, which is super exciting. And they fixed a lot of stuff. It's been a lot of fun to play. I very much look forward to continuing on. It's got all the things I want. It's got the positioning. It's got the cool story. So we'll see. It's been a lot of fun, not only just to have a game that I'm playing, but also to start sharing it with people and being able to teach it.
Do we dare say what Zach said about that game? Because we've got a lot of listeners, you know, even all the way back in the Monster Apocalypse days.
Yeah.
There was here's what I'll say. There was some talk. Obviously, the last real miniatures game that's been played that was really fondly like we played Warhammer or War Machine and Hordes, which was fine. It
Yeah.
was kind of like the introduction and recognized it's a pretty good system, but not the love that Monster Apocalypse was.
No.
Zach said that he thought it might be there.
Yes.
In terms of positioning and unit play and kind of the flow of the game, it might.
The fact that you can block, like there's just, it's a lot. The thing that I like is that there seems to be, even right now in this early stage, a nice balance between dice randomness and ways to score points and to get advantages that have nothing to do with dice, have everything to do with positioning or just good planning.
All right.
And I like that a lot because you can still have those explosive dice moments, but at the same time, when you lose, at least still at this early point, I feel like it was because of a decision I made and not because of some sort of bad roll.
That's always a good sign. What about you, Robert? What about your week?
Let's see. I haven't talked about making any craft cocktails in a bit.
That's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while.
There's a long favored drink called a Queen Elizabeth, and it's got amber rum, grenadine, lime juice, and that was it.
Navy strength.
For the longest period of time, and it's a pretty decent cocktail. But then added bitters to it recently, just some grapefruit bitters. Kicked it.
Yeah, not just any. This is grapefruit bitters. That's the
bitters.
key.
Really?
Kicked it up to 11. That drink is good.
Sign me
I
up.
tried it yesterday. It was phenomenal.
Checks the box.
Stared out into
Good
the
drink.
rain through those big windows and, just thought about things.
Yes, the
Very-
world and
Pensive.
where it's going.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, very, very questionable directions at times. So for me, I guess really the main update is
Did you get that roof fixed?
no, the roof isn't
Light's still
fixed.
leaking?
Leaky lights.
Well, I've got
The light fluid is really coming out everywhere.
the life of a renter is a wild and exciting place. So much so that I should have renter's insurance already, but I'm definitely moving that direction for a number of reasons. One was because the light bulb in the middle room was leaking water.
The light bulb was leaking.
Yeah, it was dripping off the end of the thing, so it was clearly coming down like the
Electrical
part
wires.
that was hanging
From the
from the rain.
roof.
The roof, it's on fire. So that was a problem clearly. And then they've done some work where they made the water heater bigger and expanded the closet, but now all of the walls of that closet are like peeling off because the moisture is an issue because there's water and stuff in there. So that's another issue. But the third issue, or I guess I should say celebration, is that we got the first piece of furniture.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Ever.
that's a big deal.
Shannon
In your
and I
married
now,
life.
as married, competent adults, with reasonable, I
your
guess,
joint
salaries
incomes
ultimately,
combined.
by our incomes combined, by our debts slowly going away, and by more money being made over time. I guess I'm seeing how this is supposed to work in the American dream kind of mentality. Daylight's starting to open up. Anyway, we got a kind of a classic mid-century modern style desk, a Sculptra. It's got Brookshire Brathaway. I don't know. It's some kind of sculpture.
Berkshire Hathaway.
And we got a really great price on it. There's a local guy that had found it and refinished it and put it on Facebook. And we went and snapped it right up. We've been looking for a desk for like a year and a half. So now everybody has their own space. I've got my space for music. I've got the turntables and the records, and that's my like happy place. Shannon's got now all of her art supplies and various things on the desk and in the desk. So now we both have a place to go when we want to check out of normal life and check into the good life.
Creatively.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's really what you want. We also, worth noting, so this is Dungeons & Dragons episode. We have been putting together for the past few weeks the D&D subscription.
Well.
Yeah, so we're going to make an entry into new and exciting frontiers. We'll see how it goes, but basically, we're looking at, okay, D&D, what's going on with D&D? We've got adventures that are released pretty commonly. We've got the supplemental books, like Mordenkainen's about to come out. And we were thinking, man, it would be really handy. When I was a D&D player, man, it would be so nice to have just gotten that stuff, just not even thinking about it. We used to have to go to, where did we go? We went to all sorts of places in Tulsa. We'd go to the mall and stuff. We'd try to find the books, and we knew that new ones had been released, but then they weren't being stocked in like major stores. And we didn't really know about the hobby shop thing because we were pretty young at the time. Mom probably wouldn't take us in there anyway. She'd be like, what is this awful looking place? But it'd be cool to get all the books. So that's what we're going to do is basically all of the major like book expansions, the supplements and the adventures. You'll sign up for the sub. We're going to do free shipping on it for the first time. So this is our first shot at free shipping. You'll get your books in the mail. They'll be list price, free shipping, boom, send them right to you. And we'll see how that takes.
Nice.
I hope a lot of people will benefit from that kind of service. I think it's a great offering.
They seem to be putting out
I'm
some
pretty
real
pleased with it.
good, real good material.
It feels incredible just to be a part
of polish.
Because the D&D
like coming home.
book is like a staple. It's an institution. That's
We
right.
had, just to put it in perspective, we had a subscription to Dragon Magazine back in the day, and it was probably my favorite magazine I've ever had, cover to cover every month.
That's true. Yeah, and that's
More
probably
than Cat Fancy?
Oh, that's probably why. That's probably why you're the. That's probably where you're the DM that you are
The
today.
crossword in Cat Fancy was a lot better.
It's always catnip. I want to kick it.
Those words were just meow.
So let's dive into the main topic here. I gotta tell you, I look tiny on the receiver.
Yeah, we got
there on
the screen flip so we can see what
I
we
understand
look like.
Zach gets around it because he's just
Steven's
kind of a bigger.
Look at this. It's
He's
the
a bigger
same
person.
size.
It literally looks like these books are crushing me.
If
on
you're
the screen.
if you're listening on the audio, you're just gonna have to take our word for it.
Well, just
That's right.
envision me being
Tiny.
smaller, significantly smaller than
Yeah, he's like
everybody else
shoulder
in the
height
shot.
for me in this shot. That's pretty crazy.
All right, so how did you start playing D&D? Let's kick it off there. Let's talk about the origins of
I'll
Dungeons
start.
and Dragons.
Spin a
Yeah.
yarn.
So my uncle also happens to be Steven's uncle.
Yeah,
by a
same
strange
uncle.
twist of fate.
believe it or
Yeah.
not.
Even as father and son.
Even his father and son. That's right.
For my maybe 8th birthday, it was when I was very young, he gave me the old classic D&D box set, Dragon on the cover.
See, I thought he gave it to us.
Here we go.
But apparently I was mistaken.
Well, you were too young to appreciate such things.
It was that black box
Yeah,
with the
the
red
black
dragon.
box, the red dragon, yeah.
Right.
And I immediately dove into it.
Nice.
And I don't know what it was about it, but our father also was super excited to play with us, which was great. He had a character that was roughly based off Jerry Lewis's Buddy Love character. And Steven, who was...
You sketched it.
3 years, yes, I did, off of a mug, his little caricature.
Great
of Buddy Love.
sketch.
And then Steven had a gnome, who I believe was Godnack, but the name was
There was a
lost.
million
he
words.
a
I was
snibbler
really
snibbling?
well. I was really bought into the game, you know. So it was like, well, here's example gnome names, and it's like 7,000 characters, weird underground syllables, soundings, and it's
Yeah.
like, all right, well, I'll go for that. And so I made like a 20. It was like it was weird. It was like 25 characters. Also worth noting that he gave us that game because he played all the time.
That's right.
On the boat that he worked on.
That's right.
In the high seas.
Oh, wow.
So he would be
Going after Jaws?
I think it was an oil-related thing. We never could tell. He might have been like the Secret Service or something. But he would go around, and so he'd be gone for like 6 months at a time, 8 months at a time, and on this boat would be various people from various countries, but they all could get together and play D&D. So that's where he learned about it, and so they were on the boat, you know, all the time, and they would play D&D together.
That's awesome.
That's really cool. So yeah, I would spend my time like making little maps on graph paper and coming up with cool magical weapons. They're way too powerful. Magma sword was one of them.
Ooh, classic. Magnus
How does
Sword.
it hold together?
And then
if it's magma?
Steven and Dad would go on these through these dungeons. There was no real narrative tying it together. There was no real town time.
Sure.
It was just like you're in a dungeon.
Just adventures
go
loosely
through it.
strung
Yeah,
together.
you see
Because
some stuff.
I'm not even sure at that point, because it was in the box. That might have been advanced. I don't know if advanced was in the
don't-
box
yeah,
or if
I
it was
don't
after the
know.
box. But I don't think the box really focused on that, because it was about like maps a little bit more, and it was more about like that basic
You wake up
combat
in a
system.
dungeon.
Yeah.
kind
It was
of
that
thing.
kind of a dungeon crawly type thing.
Far out.
Yeah, and then I think I kind of put it down for a while as the teenage years started, and then I met my friends, my high school friends, middle school friends, one whose name happens to be and still is Josh Taylor, and he was playing with his cousins, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and so he brought out the Monsters Manual, and he brought out the Player's Handbook, and then the Tony DeLizzy sketches in the Monsters Manual,
That was
and
it.
I was sold.
Yeah.
Game over. And then it never really stopped. I remember actually, this is where my particular story will end. I remember talking to my friend Joey about Dungeons and Dragons on the bus, and he'd never encountered it before. And I was like, hey, just imagine that you could do anything. Like you have a character and they can do anything. And he's like, you mean I could do X? And I was like, you could do that. He's like, you mean I could do Y? I was like, you could do that. And then we'd laugh, you know, on the bus. And like, this is so great. So we just like make up scenarios, and before we knew it, we had 4 or 5 guys, Steven included, that were playing on a pretty regular basis. That was
My goodness.
one of the glue. And then, of course, we would always at recess, not always, but sometimes at recess or at lunch, crack out the old Dungeons and Dragons stuff, look through it, make characters, talk about the upcoming campaign. It was
times.
fabulous.
Yeah, kept us out of trouble. See, I'll pick up right here because obviously we're related. And so basically, like, there's 2 things for me. One is that we played D&D with Josh and Joey and Daniel and
Jared.
Jared, of course, Jared. Like, I remember going to his house. And, it was so awesome. So, but to that point, those weekends, and we tried to make them every weekend, where you would go to somebody's house and all of the friends would stay the night. one night, and you would play all night until people were just like, literally
dice
their
in their
eyes
hands.
were closed, couldn't handle it anymore. And then wake up the next day, sometimes try to play some more, and then go to your respective homes. But the excitement of the Friday night, whenever it was about to happen, I couldn't contain myself at school. I was like thinking about it like crazy. And we kind of kept that cycle up until graduation.
Yeah.
You
Nice.
know what I mean? And I think that actually is, I talked to Shannon about this a lot. She had like a lot of rules, and there was a lot of oversight of her from her parents and this kind of thing. And I was just thinking like, I didn't even have an opportunity to get into anything weird because I just wanted to go role play
Right.
with like the same group of
Yeah,
people I've been
with my
hanging out with
friends,
since
yeah.
middle school, and we're still great friends with everybody involved in any role playing session that took place. And I have to imagine that the D&D connection is the reason that those friendships became so
most
strong.
certainly. Most
I think
certainly.
it is. I remember taking that I think it was 2nd edition Player's Handbook to school, middle school, and I would read it constantly. Class, lunch, constantly. Back, forth, cover to cover, all the time. Stare at that halfling. God, that halfling. First time I think I'd seen an epic halfling. Usually it's like, ooh, we're in
Some would say they don't exist, but
yeah, exactly. We're in jester pants and like, ooh, we're tricksters. But it was like, this was this like ragged cape and like green
Oh, I remember
pants
that,
and
yeah.
like this white
he's
cape
got a
flung
sling
back.
and a staff.
And I was just like, yes,
Looking
absolutely.
real good. Looking real
So
good.
what about you? So that's the woolly side of this. What about you, Rob?
I got kind of before getting directly into DD, I was in high school when I first started up, and I was playing some kind of hybrid game with like a custom character dice mechanic thing. May have been called Pit Fighter. Somebody might know about that and catch me up on that. Anywho, played that very minimally, not very long at all, but it got my appetite whetted just enough where I started gravitating towards RPGs, but I didn't have a circle that was into them at the time. So I was playing things like Baldur's Gate,
Yeah.
Baldur's Gate 2, Neverwinter Nights on the PCs, because I've been a master racer since before I even knew that was a thing. And that got me juiced in, really into it, so that by the time college rolled around, I was all about some D&D, and it's like, I got to get a group together. And I had some friends, and we essentially had just a fantastic group. Naturally fantastic group, people well adept at both playing characters, running sessions, even had a resident artist in the group, and she would do portraits of all the characters.
That's amazing.
Just great
Dude, you
stuff.
struck gold.
Struck
basically.
absolute gold. We would play music, like thematic ambient music to like set the mood, depending on what the setting was, what was happening. It was a fully fleshed out kind of experience, and did that essentially throughout the entire collegiate experience, but it kind of just pittered out until moving out here.
Oh, yeah, that's
and
right.
we were doing some non-D&D campaigning.
we were doing some
but
role-playing.
back to Mama.
Yeah, here we go.
'cause here she is.
Yeah.
Tell me this. What's the character that comes to mind when you think of like favorite D&D characters? Do you have one, John? You got
I
one?
was mostly running the
Almost
games.
all the time. Let me tell you, I'll give you all the time, like 100% of the time. Let me tell you.
Mostly running.
So I think the experience that I had that really solidifies why D&D is so special is that I had a Gnoll, the Gnoll warrior named Grido, and we had a party that was me as the Gnoll warrior. We had Joey who was playing a Thycrene, which is essentially a praying mantis
from Dark Sun.
named Samuel. We had Josh was playing some kind of human with a giant pet black bear or brown bear or something that eventually got tossed into the river.
Definitely black bear.
On accident. And we went and we got a quest from a king and we fought a lich and it was incredible. And that character, I remember being so excited about the potential to play something so foreign to me. It was like, man, this is like a dog person.
Yeah.
And they have cool stats and they have all these weird like howl abilities and you can do weird dog stuff. And it was like, man, this is just a wide open. I had never, that's when the blinders really came off and it was like, anything's possible.
Yeah, you can
Anything's
do whatever.
possible
There's
in this
no
world.
limits. There's no like mechanical limits.
Just like in Bartertown.
Remember that forever. I will remember that forever. Yeah.
I talk about a lot like video games being a universe created by a person that you're in, and that has very definitive things. But D&D, I mean, at its core, is really boundless.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there are certain things that you probably need to do
Your
to keep it on the
imagination is
rails.
your canvas.
But yeah, it's like, hey, I want to play a dog person. It's like, all right. If you got the right DM, all right. You know, let's
A
do
work
it.
dog, show dog.
Yeah,
you know.
what kind of dog you want.
Yeah,
I mean, we can throw it in there.
What about you, Robert? You have a favorite character?
Yeah, in that aforementioned group, I played, this was all in like the Forgotten Realms setting, a moon elf sorcerer, finally recalled his name, Amlian, and we played a very long campaign. It was like level 5-ish to level 20.
See, we never did that.
We never did that.
And
we never got that far.
It was a masterpiece of a campaign. Buddy of mine, then Joel, put that on, and it was just tip.
Yeah,
top.
can you get into it? Because once you guys got to a certain level, you had pretty much accomplished your goals as a party. You split ways, but you kept playing.
We did not do that.
No,
we
what about the-
maintained cohesion.
Is that a
Oh, you mean
fever game?
IRL, not in the dream?
No,
not in the game.
In the game.
In the game, yeah.
Because
Maintain cohesion.
I remember you telling me a story about like your wizard at some point, which is like in his tower, and he had a singular role-playing session. Everyone else played extras, and you kind of jumped around there. Is that true?
Oh, so maybe like a couple of specialty sessions kind of
Yeah,
thing?
a couple of specialty sessions.
Those were only in the blueprints. We only did like one, and I think it was mine, if memory serves,
okay.
but that we didn't get the rest of them up and running because the intent was to eventually do like some scenarios and then an epic level campaign where everybody kind of like.
I've always thought that was
reprises
a really
the
cool
run. It is
idea.
a very cool thing.
Well,
But yeah,
so we all started at various times and think fondly of the game. I think that's obvious at this point. The real question here is why is it so fun, right? So why do you keep playing D&D?
to me, it's frankly like all of the old fantastical conventions are adhered to and supplemented with great world building. So when I mean like conventions, you've got characters with unique roles and abilities, sweet loot, it's a cooperative storytelling experience, all those kinds of things come together and it's just like this game's got it all. And then when it comes to the world building, for me, it's just, you know, there are pantheons of gods, there are cities with proper nouns and key characters who you know just live there. It's
maps
like,
and histories.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you know, where's so-and-so live? You could just say right away. It's like, oh, do you know this setting? There it is. But all those things to me, it's just nitty-gritty kind of details that flesh out the experience, and it's just completely engrossing. You can get lost.
And
in
it
all
got
that.
it got the head start on everything. It was and still really is the role-playing game. So you have
Dragon Jam.
fan-made, player-made, everything you could ever imagine. Entire worlds have been built by many, many different people that work in D&D and work with. You're a Forgotten Realms guy, right?
Oh yeah.
See,
yeah.
we never.
We always
here's the
did
thing.
custom.
That's the jam, and a lot of people just don't do it. But it's a great universe
yeah.
in its own right.
It seems like that they've actually really stepped up their game as far as even the world that the books themselves are in.
Oh heck yeah.
We did that one in Black Sun or something,
Dark Sun,
and
yeah.
it didn't turn out.
There's a
very
lot of
well.
dexterity rolls. I don't remember exactly what happened.
But I-
we got
Boulders,
stampeded.
etc.
I
I
think.
even ran one in like first stage Middle Earth using the D&D setting.
Yeah,
or
that's
rules.
the thing. That's what was so good about it is we could create any setting and did all the time, and the rules are fine. It's like, yeah, we just need a way to resolve stuff and kind of have a basis for how a character works.
Yeah.
And then we just went, right? What about you? What makes it so fun?
The biggest thing, and you and I have talked about this, Stephen, is that it to me it satisfies the same urge as like traveling, like going to a foreign country for the very same reasons Robert was talking about, which is there's a history there and there are people there and they're populated and they've got everything and you can fill in your mind the gaps that don't exist necessarily in a video game, for instance, or even on a board game.
Yeah.
It's just like this is the world, describe kind of the rough what the city looks like. Oh my gosh, and you are traveling with your friends.
Yeah.
And you keep those stories forever. And I think that's what actually contributes to the bond that players play. So not only was it that, but it was for me a very, very fertile ground to let my own imagination run wild with the sort of constriction or boundaries of other people. I had to be able to explain my vision well enough and to conceive my vision well enough to have other people interact with it.
Yeah.
And as they interact with it, it grows. And so it was a really cool push and pull back and forth. It's like, hey, I want to go here. Is there a here? And it's like, well, I can make that happen. And then now that goes into the equation of what the world is and what the setting is and how we can really realize those things.
Yeah.
And that's so rewarding.
How cool is it as a game master, to really hone the skill of on-the-fly creativity?
Oh, it's my favorite thing.
Like that has got to come in handy later on in life,
Yes.
right? Where it's just
Yes.
like, even at this job, even when you're
I'm
creating
still
a
doing
token
it.
set or a design or a copy or anything like that, it's like, boom, like I need to tap into creativity immediately, and here is this result. And I wonder how much that has actually had an impact.
Oh, I think a great deal.
On the results.
A great deal.
Well, thanks for doing it.
Well, I mean, it's something that, first of all, I was drawn to for whatever reason, but you start to learn sort of techniques, which is you learn the foundational elements of what you want your world to be. The way I equate it is a lot like you can either paint a flower if you want a flower to be purple. Let's say a white flower if you want it to be purple. You can paint every little leaf. You can go on the details and get your paintbrush.
Just like in Alice's Wonderland.
Or you can just pour food coloring into the water and then let the rest take care of itself. And I'm much more in the second line of thinking when the world building is concerned.
Nice,
So
yeah.
you really
So
want
there's a
that
lot of osmosis.
Yeah, you want to understand what makes your world tick.
DM by osmosis.
And then because of that, it actually the details will take care of themselves. And so that's on a token set, even I do so much research beforehand because that's that foundational watercolor or colored water that then sprouts whatever.
Kind of flows out there.
Yeah, it does. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, talk about your
I'll
own
focus
self.
on it. Actually, Ben and I were talking about this just yesterday. He's only played 2nd edition. Can you believe that?
He's still trying to roll up Thacos in business.
He's only ever played 2nd. But I agreed with a lot of the things that he ultimately brought to the table because we were talking about the personal aspect of the game. So we talked about the imagination and that kind of the system itself. But getting players around the table also picked up a great term from Bryce, the theater of the mind. There's kind of this, D&D groups and even role-playing groups in general have a sliding scale between like theater of the mind and grids and mechanics. Right? So like what we were doing was almost entirely theater of the mind based stuff. We were sitting around, not even around necessarily a table, but on a couch and a chair and somebody's on the floor. And then it's like, hey, what'd you roll over there kind of stuff. And so it was all a conceptual enterprise. Whereas, Robert, did you do more of the grid? Did you actually put guys on a map kind of thing?
A bit. We definitely did do some of that, but it was more like just quickly drawing out the quick thing, and then you could position yourself just so, because we did a mixed kind of a play style where there was a co-equal amount of like combat and just pen and paper role playing. So if you're doing any decent amount of action and you want to take it a little seriously, I think those grids are deeply helpful.
But when you have this many people, basically more than one, taking place in a shared theater, all of these minds, contributing. It's not just about what's happening in the game, which has tremendous importance at times. Like I've been moved emotionally with role-playing sessions as much or more than any movie or book or anything that I've engaged with. Or real life experience, yes. It's more meaningful than anything that has happened in my real life. But you have a bunch of people who are essentially acting / doing improv in front of each other, which is not a comfortable place off the bat.
Most,
right? Like I wouldn't go up in front of any number of even people that I'm very familiar with and be like, hey, look at me, I'm going to do an improv bit real quick. Hey. I'd be like, this is weird. I don't want to do that.
I think I speak for everyone when we would love it if you did.
Improv, hard to do well. Playing out a character with flaws.
Yes, that was a big deal.
Yeah. So that I think is an evolution of role players, because most people start off being like, I want to be as good as possible. I want to be awesome.
It comes from the video game world where you want to have that like Doom character, the big gun where you just shoot everything. It is satisfying in some way, ultimately. But it's satisfying in the same way every time, whereas playing a character with flaws gets very interesting very quickly.
Yeah, immediately. And it's like, you start there and then 10 years later, it's like, can I take a 1 on all my stats?
Yeah.
Like, can I just see what that's like?
I can't do anything.
So you have the flaws that you're constantly playing out. And a lot of times these characters, and this is getting to kind of the heart of the matter, these characters are representing what the people around the table want to be, or aspects that they themselves are aspiring to.
Or certainly they want to explore.
That's right. Well, because to me, like, there are certain types of characters I'm always drawn to. There are certain types of characters you're always drawn to. Robert can't stay away from magic.
No, wizards, 100%.
Help him. It doesn't even matter. You could dangle any number of carrots.
It's literally the coolest thing that ever was. Magic? You kidding me?
So you learn a lot about the other people at the table.
Yep.
Based on what they tend to play. You learn a lot about yourself through the characters that you play.
Which actually very interesting. At this very table right now, we've got someone who tends towards elves, wizards, someone who tends towards halflings, and someone who tends towards dwarves. And I think if you're looking at the video, you can actually probably see which is which.
That's so true. It's crazy.
It's very bizarre.
I don't know how you're going to get that from Stephen.
Well, Here's the ultimate kind of wrap up of the relationship aspect. Is I think that there's something important that doesn't happen in board games, video games, card games, and it explicitly doesn't happen. Like they make a point for this not really to happen. There's no vulnerability being shown or seen at the table.
Right.
When you're in a role-playing group and you're going through all of these challenges and adventures together and you're acting things out and embodying characters, it's a very vulnerable place to be.
You got to open yourself up a little bit.
I mean, you can't be afraid of people laughing at you for making a funny elf voice, right? You have to all be bought in to the narrative and what's going on and what's going to make it a great story. And when that happens, the kind of the security of that place is amazing, right? Where it's like you feel this freedom and openness to truly dive into these characters and really tell a great story. So having a consistent exposure with the same people being in this place of vulnerability that is not normal in everyday life, I think that forms tremendously strong relationships.
Oh my goodness, yeah, I think it has to.
If you think everybody listening, probably if you have a role-playing group / D&D group, I'll bet a lot of people are thinking right now, those are some of the best, most close and strong relationships that I have. I hope that's the case. If it's not, perhaps I'm completely wrong. And then how someone plays reveals a lot about themselves.
That's very
right? Because
true.
we have Josh, who was always about the rules and the mechanics, and he wanted to play the weirdest characters possible.
That's true. There's as many flaws as he could take. This is on GURPS actually. As many flaws as he could take, and as many ability he was.
That's right. Just max it out. And then you have the guys trying to beat the game, trying to know everything, and really beat the DM. You have the guy who's only interested in storytelling, so it's I don't know, that's you. I don't know the rules at all. I'm just here for the
guy
party.
who's always out of the room.
The question, the title of this is Revisiting D&D, so where did we go? Why did we stop?
4th edition. Period.
Oh, you're that guy, huh?
Actually, no. That's just, picking on somebody. But 4th edition for me was part of it in that it was the next iteration, the next step, seemingly in the progression of things. But it was, in my humble opinion, a complete dud. Just did not play in any way how you would like or expect, that kind of thing, especially given all of the history that came before it. But the other thing was just with jumping around so much and knowing that good role-playing is a very deep commitment and responsibility, especially if you're running the show, that it's just in the midst of everything else, if I can't put my best foot forward to either play a character or run a show, then it's just it's not worth doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of investment there. You have to be committed. It's it's like getting a gym membership, right? It's well, it's not at all like that because you actually need to go to the role-playing session. You can sign up for the gym and never go, which is the most strategies.
I'm still a member to 3 gyms.
What about you, John? So we kind of ended up in the same
We ended up in the same
situation.
round. The big thing, kind of like what Robert said, we moved out to college and kind of broke up the group. Although I ended up, everyone that I roleplay with eventually ended up coming back to the same college that we were all in, and we're still friends to this day, and we still roleplay this day. But the biggest thing for me, and I don't know if it was 4th edition, but I just sort of got tired of fighting the system for it to make it do what I wanted to, especially as I got in this job and I started learning there's other stuff out there, Burning Wheel, Torchbearer, GURPS, etc. And was hey, well, there's actually some people who are thinking about this the way that I've been thinking about this forever and using house rules to force into D&D. So that was one aspect. Then we got in on Pathfinder, and we did it was basically 3.5, and we started running that, but I found that I could not put the amount of effort and the amount of care into the character that I was playing. It's a pretty big deal. For the simple reason that I was now employed in a creative field. And I didn't realize that until my friend's wife, who is also a photographer, she was playing the roll them dice fighter, right? And that's all she could do because she had to think creatively every day. And it's unfortunate. And maybe it's a convenient excuse for me, but I really felt like I was drawing from the same well, and that well at that point in my life was very dry. I want to revisit it. I want to go back to it, and I'm very excited about 5th edition for the reasons that I was just talking about. It seems like it's really taken a lot of lessons out, and I'm really excited to go back into it. Hopefully now I can compartmentalize those two things.
It's a real evolution.
That's what stopped me from playing is the moving, which I think a lot of people have, the fighting with the old system, which I think some people have realized realized, and certainly D&D has realized, and then finally like just that creative limitation that I was experiencing.
There's a lot of people out there that do credit 4th edition with, first of all, it very much was a streamlining process. For us, I think we would say it streamlined in the wrong direction because we're a theater of the mind role player type people, rather than the turn it into Dota or World of Warcraft or whatever, which is the constant criticism that I have.
Yeah, for me, 4th edition was more like it was trying to be fashionable. It was going with this new kind of experience, which is this MOBA business, but it is so vastly different than the traditional fundies of what D&D had always been.
I'll say this. I was reading an article to get ready for this episode, and there was a very compelling case that the 4th edition of D&D actually paved the way for it to be as big as it is now, because it did become so much more accessible. And not so much about the vulnerability, but more about the table. And now you can move those people potentially into 5th edition.
But it was the bridge.
Sure.
It
was the bridge.
I can buy
There's
that
an
for sure.
argument for that.
And bless them for trying. Like at least they tried something and it failed, and they had the data to be able to say like, well, we need to change it. It needs to not go in this direction, but now we have to do something with this, which is really cool.
And I want to hit on what you're talking about, like going into the more indie RPG area, because once it was like D&D, GURPS, it's like
Star Wars role playing.
Star Wars role playing. It's like this is all pretty much the same. But then I think we had our first interaction with Luke at Gen Con, and we saw Burning Wheel, and we saw Savage Worlds stuff, some of the explory type, and there was like, these mechanics are crazy. There's no
people
D20
have been thinking about this
skills.
Yeah.
There's a lot more kind of just like wishy-washiness and storytelling as the priority. And so it was like, man, D&D is just like an old dinosaur. I'm going to cast that off and get into some of this new stuff. But then what we're finding is that, the new stuff has some things to contribute for sure. And we've had some great experience. I still think Torchbearer is one of the most brilliant systems ever. But now as we turn back to D&D, it's kind of like on two fronts. You now have a really respect for how good it was ultimately and is, and how nice it is to actually have clarity in the rules and nicely laid out charts and weapons that have very specific like damage. Like you didn't appreciate that stuff until it was gone. And now you come back and it's like, actually having a little more structure can be really nice. And then secondarily, 5th edition introduces a lot of the mechanics that took us from D&D to the indies, and now back from the indies to D&D 5th edition.
Yeah, it's nice to know, reading through this Player's Handbook, which I've only recently done, that they haven't been asleep. Right? They haven't just been like, well, this is our successful product. Here we go. Like it's going to be successful. They've been taking notes, and they've been really implementing that. And with the flaws and ideals and all that stuff they've implemented in this, they've really taken a lot of the good stuff from the indies and now incorporated it over to really supplement and help out this new D&D.
And isn't that really what one of the critiques was that it's like the role-playing aspect of it was always the fight that you were having with the system. Whereas now they've figured out how to bake it in correctly, where it feels like a part of the system and an encouraged part. So let's roll that into essentially the kind of final piece of this, which is why we're back ultimately.
Okay. We're back, baby.
And you mentioned it. I want to talk about those indie style elements in 5th edition. A lot of people listening might have gotten off the D&D train on 4th edition and said, you know what, I'm just going to go do other things. So let me tell you some things that have changed, right? So now we have personality traits, which I think is awesome. The example they give in the book is, I've read every book in Candlekeep. So these are just perfect little things that when you think of, like for us with Burning Wheel and even for Torchbearer and Dungeon World and a lot of these, I think Dread had a lot of this going on too, although that's got the Jenga stack, so it's a totally different kind of environment. But it's just little things that you can give essentially to the Dungeon Master, the Game Master.
I'm glad you brought that up.
That they can now build an exciting and interesting story with your character based on nothing but a couple of sentences. And that is just key. I mean, that is key to a good role-playing session. You've also got an ideal, so this is essentially a belief. You've got a bond, so it's a relationship. Whom do you care most about? What place is special to you? You can be bonded to a place, a person, whatever it is.
It's really cool.
You, again, giving the Dungeon Master clues. This is what
I
want to
X
explore.
is under attack, or X has been kidnapped. Like all of a sudden, that has to be the seed of a new adventure.
That's
for
right.
you.
Oh, yeah.
You've got flaws, of course, vices, what enrages you, what are you terrified of? And then there's this inspiration mechanic, which is a fascinating little thing. Having not played 5th edition yet, having just, as you said, read the books recently and kind of gotten back into it, this inspiration mechanic is pretty cool. So if you are role-playing really well, the DM could give you inspiration.
Okay.
And what that means is that as long as you're inspired, you have the advantage on rolls.
Oh, that's right.
An advantage is an on-off switch, and if you have the advantage, then you roll 2d20, take the best result. If you have the disadvantage, then I think you roll 2 and take the worst,
I believe
or
so.
something like that.
Yikes.
So yeah, so that's a really cool feature. But then they've done this kind of under the radar. There's like one paragraph on this in the player's handbook, which is anytime a player who has inspiration witnesses another player playing their character really well, they can give them their inspiration. So I don't know how this actually is going to work in practice, but the way that I envision it is like, let's say I did something really like, I read the book instead of attacking the monster, try to figure out its weaknesses, and that's very much in character for me. And I got beat up for it and this kind of thing. And like I could have saved the party, but instead I chose to read my book. And then the DM's like, man, you did that well. You are inspired now. Let's say you're inspired because you now have the knowledge of the book. So I'm inspired, but then let's say this golem walks up to you and is like, oh my gosh, I'm about to crush Jonathan. And you're like, I'll defend my friends, and put my shield up and just take the killing blow. I can take it upon myself to be like, I want to give you the inspiration that I have so that you have a defensive role that is now way more buffed. So it's this really cool kind of passing around the props on the table.
That's right.
Which is insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's great from a mechanical perspective because, again, you reward good role playing, and also you enable reciprocity around the table, that the person who is role playing can help out other people, even if you're a book reader, right? You're reading a book, you're not contributing to combat, but now you have that inspiration that you can give. I love those kind of mechanics that really help form those social bonds.
It makes people think outside of the game, where it's like, I can zoom out and look at the entire story instead of my particular role in the story. Anytime you have players thinking bigger about the story in the session, it always turns out better.
Yeah.
So let me tell you guys out there a quick story about how all of this technically began. We were doing an interview, and Bryce is now here, so he did well. And we were talking to him about basically, the kind of history with games and whatnot. And he told us about he's been playing D&D for a long time, went to a shop here in Tulsa to play, and had a really horrible experience, like a really negative, people, making fun of and inside jokes and, you're not part of our crowd kind of thing. And I remember thinking during that interview, it's like, we've traditionally not focused on role-playing in the store, but it's such a travesty to think that could happen to somebody who's interested in playing Dungeons & Dragons or a role-playing game.
Yep.
And then they might never, ever come back to it and try it again.
Because the benefits of playing that are so
And so it's like,
great.
we've got to do this now. Like, we as an institution have got to do it now. So we started talking about it and looked at the D&D 5th edition books, and Robert got it, was glad to be like, oh, you better order a test copy here just to see if the system's worth anything. And we had done the State of Tabletop podcast, the history of Wizards, history of Games Workshop, how D&D played a huge role in all of that. And it's like, you know what? Let's give D&D another shot.
See if
and
this
maybe,
old girl still has got some
see if it's got any fight in it. And it did. And 5th edition was great. And holding these D&D books again, those hardcovers, nothing like that cover.
So glossy.
It's just,
that beautifully glossy cover.
it goes right to some part of my brain.
Turning the pages and the art is happening, and it's just like, yeah. So we went full steam ahead. It's like, let's do a subscription. Let's host it in store. Let's get a part of the Wizards Play Network, which has been an exciting adventure all its own. And then here we are.
Yeah.
And I remember that's where the Theater of the Mind comment came from. Bryce was like, 4th edition was more about kind of the grid combat side of D&D. He said 5th edition was about the Theater of the Mind style of D&D.
That's awesome.
So I was like, all right, you got it.
Yeah, you're saying all right things.
We're doing it. So that's why we're here, and that's kind of how this all started. And now we got a campaign kicking around. We're actually going to make characters tonight. So tell us a little bit. Robert's going to be running this one. Tell us a little bit about how this campaign is going to go. What's the setup here?
The setup is we are at in 1200, it's the real world with a twist.
History.
Real
It's
world
got
with a
history.
twist.
We're going to inject some fantasticalness into it. No spoilers,
Yeah.
but some fantasticalness will be injected mainly so that we can use magic.
Yes.
And have fantastical creatures, all that kind of fun
nice,
stuff.
yeah.
And we're going to roll up some characters. We're probably going to start in Constantinople, and we'll see where we go from there. Because the world's your oyster, and for me particularly, because there's such a lack of a shared history, Forgotten Realms and all the things that you guys have done. Setting it in the real world and spicing it up a bit is a great way for everybody to have some immediate understanding about where we are, what we're doing. You might not know all the ins and outs of like a medieval period, but if I could say France, you at least know where that is.
Yeah.
If I say you're going to Rome now, it's like, Rome, all right.
I get
But
that.
if I tell you it's like you're going to Waterdeep after a first stop at Neverwinter, it's just like, do what? So it's just very convenient.
And I think the key thing
lets
about
players get in.
I think the key thing about the way you've set up this world, first of all, you're uniquely positioned to do this because you know history front, back, side to side. But then also you have the Eastern Church, which is practicing magic,
Yes.
and the Western Church, which is outlawed magic.
Correct.
And I'm going to be from the East, Jonathan will be from the West, so I'm going to play an illusionist character that essentially can't get caught using magic.
At least in the West.
Yeah, at least in the West. And then I think you're looking at playing a coyote
Like
type.
a human smuggler.
Like you're
trying to
smuggling
get in.
me through the West as we're kind of going along and getting paid for the trouble.
Yes.
So even I'm reluctant to let Jonathan's character know that I can use magic in any form, which is perfect for illusion.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to be like we're walking around and it's like, man, where did that thing come from?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, that was crazy.
Yeah, bizarre.
That was very
Gee
weird.
whiz.
So
Yeah.
we're looking forward to that. It's good to be back in the saddle.
Gotta tell you, I was looking over just the ideals, and one thing I love about any role-playing game is just if they have a ton of examples, and they have it for every possible incarnation. I'm so excited about making characters tonight. I'm so excited
There's
about
nothing
it.
like that, is
No,
there?
because you can, there's just so many, I love, I'll try to explain this as simple as possible, but I love role-playing games, and this is one of the things that D&D is really doing, which is taking the human experience or the character building and simplifying it down to as core of mechanics as you have. Because once you fill out these personality traits, your ideals, your bonds, and your flaws, you got a lot to go on at that.
You got a lot.
And I'm really excited to put it together and see how that ends up.
Well,
We'll be leveraging.
We hope that everybody out there listening and watching maybe considers doing the same. And if you also want to rediscover D&D, please certainly
Join us.
do it. Join us and let us know. Let's move on to some questions here.
We're off page. Here we
I'm
go.
going to start with Instinctive, referencing last week's podcast. Add me to the list of those bitter over the FFG split, costing us Conquest,
Wah, wah.
Chaos in the Old World, and Forbidden Stars.
Dang.
The latter two I had no experience with whatsoever.
One of those is an RPG, isn't it? Isn't
I
that?
believe so,
Forbidden
yes.
Oh
Stars?
yeah, they had some really nice covers for those.
They had
Yeah.
some really nice covers. What is role-playing in the Warhammer universe like? Go out, try not to die?
Yeah, try not to die. Oh man, Terror. Sorry about you.
Now a question for you. You being us. With your recurring discussions of LCG structure and life cycle, where is the post-mortem on Conquest? Specifically, I know Robert was a huge fan of the game.
Huge.
Did he get rid of his collection? Does he still play occasionally? Do others at TC? The question is relevant to those of us contemplating the buy-in to L5R, ANR, and other LCGs. Do they live or die by the cult of the new, or can they stand on their own merits with a fixed card stock of, say, 2 deluxes and 3 cycles?
That's a really good question.
Well, Robert, you were called out on that, so you've got to answer it.
Personally, I incinerated my collection, scattered it to the winds. Just kidding, but something equivalent to that.
Which is 100% in character, by the way. That,
Yeah, yeah.
It speaks to the
Sorry.
game.
We're both
It's,
minimalists.
We're
ultimately,
both
so it's like,
minimalists. Well, this thing's dead. See ya. But no, I think that if your perspective is such, you can view any of these games as board games. They just have a lot of component pieces and they're highly customizable, but there was at least a sufficient amount of material put out for Conquest. There's a bevy of choices to be making no matter who you're playing as. So just mix it up, house rule it if you have to.
Make balanced decks rather than optimized
Yeah,
decks.
you can nerf Clivex right now if you want
Please,
to.
just throw it in the garbage,
Nerf
would
it.
you?
Well, and there are
send
people.
Brad a letter or a tweet.
I didn't. Yeah, Brad would love that. I didn't realize
like killing Clivex.
there are people who seek out dead games.
Oh, yeah.
For this very reason, they don't have to chase stuff anymore. Ben is actually one of those people. That's how he
Vintage gaming.
started over here.
That's right.
So potentially, it doesn't live and die by cult of new, but I think that there is such a groundswell of people that chase that it is very easy to play whenever there's new stuff coming in. We see it in the store.
Yeah,
when there's a new release for anything, there's excitement that draws people in.
So that's where the players generally go.
Yeah, if you have a dedicated group, you can do whatever you want. That's the exciting part about these
That's
games.
right. That is cool. Let's move on to Elvis Nolasco.
He didn't die, he just went home.
Has asked this question quite a few times.
Uh-oh.
So we're getting to it finally. I feel that the happy medium between 40K and X-Wing is Ruin Wars.
Oh, Ruin Wars.
I've asked this question before, but what are your thoughts on Ruin Wars and where it stands today in the industry? I feel for those of us that are new to both the tabletop and hobby communities, it offers a way to get into painting and models, but has a simple enough concept that can be learned in an hour or less. Why do you think it hasn't taken off more than it has?
I mean, I will, from my operational perspective within Covenant, it had one of the greatest whimpers of a release that I've ever seen of a new title. It pushed out a number of new things at the onset, and then it was just this great release desert where
Classic.
there was insufficient choices, options, models, etc., etc., etc. And particularly for a miniatures game, your play will become extremely repetitive extremely quickly, and with the proportionate investment being higher than most other game types, it's very disincentivizing to even get going. And if you kind of miss that jumping off point at the onset, it is hard, if not impossible, to ever get that back. So they've got an uphill battle ahead of them, I think, most definitely. But they seem to be doubling, if not
They're
tripling
putting
down.
a lot of resources into it.
Yeah,
to try to get it
so
up.
we'll see if the player bases respond. But at the same time, when they put it out, what was it, a year and a half ago, it was an entirely different landscape. We've gotten major reboots of all of these classic, Games Workshop, etc. titles, if not, you think up-and-comers like Godtear coming out. So it's like, ooh, I don't know.
It is a very, very, very competitive market in the miniatures market right now, and I just don't think they were able to ride that initial wave of excitement to a saturation point, which is what you need to have.
And to the point, it was kind of like, what excitement? Because
it's a vanilla setting.
You have, okay, so tell me about Ruin Wars, right? It's like
Terranoff.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Everything that I've heard about Ruin Wars in terms of the mythology is that it's extremely vanilla, elves, dwarves, etc. There's nothing particularly unique and exciting about the way that it is being told, the way that the story is being told. I mean, you have your
But vanilla is my favorite flavor.
and things like that. But
There's some cool bug models.
yeah, I mean, the models look good.
Models look great, actually.
But the thing is, think about modeling and hobby gamers and people who are playing 40K or fantasy. You have already invested so much time and energy into those models and in the collection you already have. To get anybody to consider a new miniatures game, you have to bring something incredibly new to the table.
I think that's a really good point, is that just by the very nature of how the world is constructed, it is siphoning almost 100% from old or current Warhammer Fantasy players. And when someone has that much invested time, energy, etc., in a system, in a world, and you offer a very similar world, for the same price point, with less
frankly,
players,
inferior world.
It doesn't have the history.
If you want to talk about fleshed out, well-crafted worlds, both fantasy and 40K from Games Workshop, they've got detail out the wazoo.
And that's to say nothing about the mechanics. I think he may be right here. It could be a happy medium between 40K and X-Wing, but the setting, it just doesn't fly off the shelves because, again, it's not a niche. It's not a niche that has any room, really. And then you're trying to wedge this little thing into it. It's going to be very hard.
And here's the last thing I'll say about that is that I think in the landscape right now, as it stands, you have got to do something phenomenal to get any kind of a miniatures/hobby, put your stuff together game to a critical mass of super excitement. Games Workshop had 30 plus years to get there. And they were the first to market, and they made it happen. War Machine and Hordes basically took advantage of that singular opening where Games Workshop was starting to do very poorly, had a very similar universe that was pretty well
It was
fleshed
pretty
out.
cool,
and they
yeah.
had some pretty good books and stuff.
I mean, there's no real steampunk in
It
Warhammer
was
Fantasy.
it was
Yeah,
slightly
that's true.
different. So like they got some players over, but now like it's not exactly doing great anymore from what I understand from the numbers. So it's like it's not that there are people out there waiting to get into hobby miniature gaming that just aren't being served right now. It's that you either have to have a game that's so innovative that they're willing to jump into hobbying for the first time, or you have to skip the hobby aspect entirely.
Yeah.
And so when I think about a game like Godtear, this is a game that is doing things like there are no factions. Well, there's a first point.
Mix and
that
match as you please.
Makes
Yeah.
things
Hexes.
interesting.
No
They're using
mixing.
hexes instead of tape measures. They have much smaller boards.
Yeah.
You have units that are attached to big champions. Your champions can never die.
That's right.
You're playing point-based games.
You're always in the game.
You say all of these things, and it's like,
Check.
that sounds new.
Check,
That sounds
check,
new.
check,
That sounds
check.
new.
Yep.
So as a player, I'm interested in this new take on war games, whereas in Ruin Wars, it was a basically side take on the same type of
Yeah.
gaming experience.
A
And I-
permutation,
Kind of
not an evolution.
More or less
Yeah.
attrition-based battlefield games in a fantasy setting.
Also
with elves and
trays.
dwarves.
I know some people like them, but for me,
Yeah.
Trays-
it just disrupts the
No
aesthetic of what I think
Yeah.
makes mini games really appealing, which is the board's clean and the models are hanging out there, but like, they're in trays. I know it's easy to move around. And stuff,
Yeah,
but
this may be showing my ignorance, but I don't know of a tray-based miniatures game that's been very successful.
Fantasy was tray-based, wasn't it? I could have sworn Fantasy was tray. I'm almost certain it was.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
'cause
sure
I-
Yeah,
someone
it
will
sure-
correct me.
sure was.
Because I remember thinking that, and the trays only came into play because they wanted as many models on the board as
yeah,
possible.
and the scale was pretty tiny.
but it was too tedious to move.
Yeah.
So, and 40K might even had done some tray stuff, but basically trays came in when it was like, we need to move 17 small guys,
dudes right now.
not in 20 minutes,
Right.
but in like 1 minute.
Right.
So it did happen, but yeah, I think that once you start introducing trays on top of hobby modeling, painting, gluing,
Can I paint less?
Yeah.
it's just like, man, it's a lot to ask for.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so thank you guys so much for listening. We're going to ask a question, and the thing that I want to know is, what is your favorite thing about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and or do you like it less than the other versions? And if so, why or why not? So just tell me your thoughts on 5th edition. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, keep playing.